Hello everyone and welcome to the Creative Nowhere Land podcast. On this episode, I am joined by the runner-up in last year's Women in Art Prize and self-taught oil painter, Ava Khera. Often exploring the unique beauty of women and the relationship between a subject and the natural world, Ava puts emotions at the centre of all of her paintings, using subtle storytelling to encourage the viewer to look a little closer and see what lies just below the surface. Ava began her creative journey studying and then climbing the ladder as a fashion designer, working in both London and China, designing for premium brands, until a pivotal moment where she refound her love for art and painting and made the brave decision to leave the career that she knew and follow her passion to become a full-time artist. Like me, a self-confessed perfectionist, we talk about why art is an obsession, bravery and burnout, why being a full-time artist isn't just about painting, how being understood is overrated, and why a painting is always unfinished to some degree, and so much more. I've included the links in the show notes to Ava's social media and website, where you can find Ava's blog, The Painter's Pathway, Navigating a Career in Arts, which is full of useful information for anyone pursuing their dream as a creative. Make sure you check out Ava's work while you're listening to the podcast. As I say, we cover a lot of really inspiring stuff in this one. So, let's get into it. So, I'm here in the studio of Ava Khera, incredible oil painter. First of all, thanks for agreeing to be on the Creative Nowhere Land podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Are you sure you're excited?
Nervous, but excited to get into it.
That's good. And before we start, I want to congratulate you on your first year as a full-time artist.
Thank you.
How's it been? I say how's it been? I suppose there's lots of takeaways from the first year committing to be a full-time artist, but what's a sort of standout moment, a standout thing that you've learned from your first year being self-employed?
I think the standout takeaway is that it's not just about painting. When you're doing it as your job, you have to dip your feet into all these other areas. Painting becomes just a part of what you're doing. It's not the whole thing, and being willing to learn all these other skills to make your business work is, I think, the hard part, because the painting is what you really want to do. But in order to do that as a career, you have to
be everything, right?
Be a bit of everything.
Accountant, social media expert, marketer.
It's been a year of learning and trying to be consistent. So
but have you enjoyed it?
I have.
Yeah.
I can't imagine going back now. And I think a lot of people, that when they find exactly what they want to do, everything else becomes worth it.
Yeah. Because
it's driving that purpose.
And you have had a very interesting journey to get to where you are right now, which obviously we'll go into amongst this podcast. We've just had a conversation before we started that you want me to describe it, but I actually think it's much better. How would you describe your art, Ava?
I'd describe it as emotional, sensitive. I like going for those close-toned colour palettes and making really the emotion the centre of all my paintings, the atmosphere, the emotion, it's like a subtle storytelling is what I think of it when I'm painting. It's not in your face. It's something that I think people connect to on a very deep level. The people that really do resonate with it. Some people might not, and that's okay. But I think I found that the work I do tends to hit a lot of emotions.
And it's predominantly celebrating the unique beauty of women, right?
It is, yeah. I think women are so strong, so resilient, vulnerable, feminine. There's so much that goes into being a woman, and I love exploring that through the models I use. Anything I'm feeling will always come into play.
Yeah, and that's something that I definitely want to play a little bit more on later, explore some of the women in your art and some of the feeling that you can see within those paintings. But I think for now, you're self-taught, right?
I am. I
Why
studied
oils?
fashion.
I mean, sure, I mean, of all the places, I mean, as I say, your journey is really interesting to where we've got to now. And you didn't start as such being an artist in so many respects. But like,
No.
to me, I don't know whether that's just me. You might find oils very easy, but from my experience, oils are super hard to work with, super hard to learn.
Yeah, they are.
And you went, right, I'm going to teach myself oils.
I won't lie, when I started it, I was just drawn to kind of what I was seeing in oil paintings. Kind of when I'd go to a museum and I'd see so much depth and texture and there's so much you can do with oils. I didn't really realize how much I needed to learn when I started oil painting. And I'm glad I didn't, because otherwise I might have been too intimidated to even start. So I think a bit of ignorance at the start is definitely bliss.
And how does one teach themselves? Is it tutorials? Is it?
Yeah, a lot of
I don't really know.
There's so much content out there. So I'd look at a lot of painters that have kind of these online tutorials, online workshops, and then just YouTube videos. I'd basically try and learn just one thing at a time and then practice that, try and learn something else. But I was trying to learn a lot of the fundamentals because I'd previously painted with watercolors and sketching and things. But I think painting in oils has a very different mindset with looking at composition, how you kind of round out a figure or create that three-dimensionality.
And
it's a different process.
Inspiration, or I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of oil painters, but who are those ones that you go, ooh, those are the oil painters that really hit with me. I want to be not like them or try and emulate that sort of emotion that they can get within their pictures. Have you got any favourite?
I think there's a few painters that I'll really resonate with one thing that they do really well. There's one or two things, like Herbert Draper. I love his colour palettes and the story that comes out in his paintings. Because it can be very subtle, and that's what I like. It doesn't have to be this huge scene in the middle of a war, or there's motifs that can come into play that signify or symbolize.
So you more say dip into elements and go, I love that style of colour, or I love that composition. You find elements within.
Or I like how this artist uses transparency to create a bit more depth. And
oh, that's interesting. Well, that means what does that mean? How do you use transparency to create depth? And who is the artist that you're thinking of when you're thinking of this?
So there's artists like Herbert Draper, John Sargent. And sometimes it's just how they manipulate paint. So, say in the shadows, they'll kind of leave the underpainting alone in areas, so you get a bit more brightness out of it than you would when you're looking at something in reality, and it just makes the whole painting a bit more romantic, a bit more cohesive to look at.
And that definitely comes across in your images. So it's interesting that you've taught yourself this and developed this style. As I said, I'd like to talk about the work a bit more, and the women in your work especially, and the emotions in your work. But you've not had it's not been the most conventional journey to be a self-employed artist, right?
No.
What's childhood like? Are you a creative kid?
Yeah, I was always a kid that loved to draw. I was always that kid in the class that was good at art. But I don't think that was all I was. I wasn't kind of labelled that arty kid. I was quite active. I was always into sports, and I think that became my identity when I was younger. I was always a bit of a tomboy. I was kicking a football around, and so I didn't really... I loved art, and it was definitely an outlet, but it wasn't my focus at the time. I do remember thinking I want to be an artist, but
what sort of
I think it became so unrealistic. Maybe 11, 12, but though I didn't see anyone doing it. I didn't see teachers encouraging you to be an artist. Like, art class was a bit of playtime. It wasn't something that can be
syndrome. We've all been, I guess at some point during our creative careers, we've all questioned the ability to make money from our creativity and our art and these sorts of things. So, and like you say, when you don't see those people doing it, it's very difficult to have a marker for the future going, oh, well, this person did it, so I could do it.
That's it.
What were your views on artists when you were, say, 11 and you thought, well, I'd like to be an artist, But as I say, there's no reference.
What I was seeing in art at the time was very conceptual. It was far removed from the kind of art I was drawn to. So it didn't seem like my place to kind of study art at the time.
And who are you thinking about? Are you thinking about that sort of Brit art, the Damien Hirst, the shark, formaldehyde,
all the
really
kind of installation styles,
Tracy Emin,
and yeah, that's all that was really shown to me in art back then. I mean, we'd look at artists in museums and things, but that was the past. It wasn't something you could do now. I think what I was seeing more was design, was fashion, and that was a creative outlook. I thought that's doable. I can get a degree in that. I can work for other brands. I can do something that's creative, but still, I mean, it still felt risky at the time.
Yeah.
But I thought,
and we'll
I
get
can still
onto
be
your
creative
fashion
now.
because we've missed out a little bit of Ava Khera's creative story. Dancer.
Yeah.
And I said not just a dancer around the living room. You were. I'll let you describe it. You know, you did.
I started dancing when my mum moved us up to Leicester. I was 13, 14, and I think my identity shifted a lot at the time.
Tomboy to dancer.
It was very strange. I moved with my mum and my brother, and I'd never really felt girly. I'd never kind of categorized myself as that. I loved looking at dancing. When I was younger, there's a movie that I used to watch all the time, and it really stuck with me. It's called Shall We Dance, with Richard Gere and Jennifer Lopez in it. And I think that was the first time I thought, oh God, I love looking at dancing. I wish I could do something like that. And then when I moved to Leicester, I saw a bit of an opening to do that. I kind of saw, oh, there's this dance school that does Latin ballroom. And I thought, let's just give it a try. Turns out I wasn't half bad.
And you're being modest.
I started to just really focus in on it.
Yeah.
Dancing kind of became a way of helping me be comfortable with my body as a teenager. That's not always something you're good at doing, especially as a girl.
Or a boy. I remember being a teenager. It was awkward as hell.
This is it. And it was just a nice way to get comfortable in my own skin and learning how to kind of be feminine and be comfortable being feminine, that it doesn't take away from me. It is a part of me.
Do you think it was a creative outlet just because you are naturally a creative person and the art wasn't hitting that spot at the time? So you needed another form of release or that creative...
I don't know. I think it was more... how do I describe it? It was definitely a way for me to get out of my head. Whereas with painting now, I'm very much in my head, but in a different way.
Yeah. Which is, again, something I really want to talk to you about.
But it made me think about nothing but what I was doing at the time.
So it was escapism, really?
It was. It was, and it was empowering, really empowering to just be confident in how I move, how I show up to do this.
This is a very deeply personal question. What do you feel like you're escaping from at that point?
I think insecurity, a lot of doubts and feeling like I wasn't good enough at the time, that I was lesser than. And I think when I was dancing, I almost found my place a little bit. And it was nice to just feel a bit more secure in something. And I think that's what happens when you enjoy something and you're good at it and you're in a community or an environment where you've got similar people around you. It can almost feel like coming home. Yeah, it's nice to feel understood. Now I think it's a bit overrated, but...
That's an interesting thought. Can you elaborate a bit? Why do you think it's overrated now to be understood?
To be understood, I don't think it's a requirement anymore. Feel free to misunderstand me. That's okay.
Brilliant. That's like a superpower. I'm going to adopt that, or try and adopt that. That's very difficult to...
I heard, I love listening to podcasts like Jay Shetty, and he was talking a bit about the mentality that you have to be okay with people not getting everything about you and not understanding you.
Would you say you're a people pleaser?
It's something I still struggle to hold boundaries with.
I wonder if that's a creative thing. Because I'm definitely a people pleaser, and I'm trying my very hardest to not be anymore. Anyway, we're digressing. So you found another creative escape that wasn't art because, as I say, like you said, that wasn't really an option. It didn't seem like an option when you're a teenager to make a
No.
career in art?
I was good at art. I was always good in my art classes. I didn't take it further. I didn't do a GCSE in it. I did
That's
textiles
interesting.
instead because, again,
Because you knew that.
I thought if I'm going to go into design, I need to do textiles. I should let art go.
So even at that age, you were sort of thinking, right, fashion and design is a more realistic option.
Yeah.
So you made the decision you wanted to study fashion. That's the more realistic, non-starving artist route where you can actually see a progression in it.
It's funny because at the time, that still felt like I was going against all the advice and the norm. So at the time, I was really good academically. So I'd always get really good grades in everything from maths and science. And my teachers really questioned it when they saw on the list of what everyone's kind of going towards or what A-levels they're going to do. Some of my teachers kind of questioned me about my decisions. Like, is this right? Am I seeing this right? That you're going to do BTEC in fashion?
Really?
Instead of going down the maths route, science. And so even then I felt like I wasn't doing the right thing. I was doing a risky thing, even though to me it felt like the safer.
For you it felt safer, but to everyone else looking externally in on your life, they're like, oh, she should be a doctor, a lawyer, a da-da-da-da-da.
Exactly.
Did you feel pressure from external forces, as in relatives, parents? I mean, I know you say teachers.
Other relatives, yeah, they did question it.
But not mum.
No. And I'm not even sure if she remembers this, but I remember my uncle was trying to kind of advise me, kind of help me look at kind of potential A-levels to do or different colleges to look at. And I remember he was on the phone to my mum. And I didn't hear his side of the conversation, but one thing that stuck out to me that she said was, well, whatever she does, she's going to be successful.
Go, Mum.
She's going to do well at whatever she does. And hearing her not say that to me to give me confidence, but saying that to someone else about me, I think
she's fighting
really
your corner, even though when
helped.
She knows that you're not listening. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
This is it. I think the fact that she had so much faith that I could do what I wanted and be fine.
So Mum's biggest cheerleader then, really?
Yeah, and she was. I never really needed help with schoolwork or things like that. That was always something I could do, and it was relatively easy schoolwork.
You're almost in. I'm not going to tar every creative with the bush because I can consider myself relatively intelligent, but you're like academically intelligent, creatively intelligent.
I don't know. I think it made sense to me. Maths made sense. Science made sense. And I think the academic model doesn't really measure intelligence necessarily. It measures how well you can remember things or how easily you can make sense of how they specifically teach you.
Yeah.
So a lot of kids in my class could have been really intelligent. They just weren't measured in the right way.
You didn't succumb to that sort of academic pressure and stuck to your guns of still, in your eyes, choosing a relatively volatile, or what's the right word I'm looking for? Fashion. It's like me, photography. It's still the arts. It's still creative.
It's not the norm.
Exactly that. And to the external people around you, they must have seen that as a much bigger risk. You still saw it as a risk, but actually a more viable one and a viable creative industry to work in the future.
Yeah. So I think I saw it as an industry. Fashion and brands, everything like that is all around us. It's something that you can see every day. You don't see artists every day. You don't see, I didn't really see people having gallery shows every day, but I saw brands. I saw a way. I saw a path. I saw a very kind of clear path of, okay, you go to uni, you get a degree, you start working for other brands, you will climb that ladder. And that, to me, at the time, seemed like a clear journey to what I thought was my end goal.
So you went off to Nottingham Trent. Was it a fashion design course, a fashion management course? What course was it at Nottingham?
So it was fashion design.
Okay, so actually the creative rather than more the business.
It was very intense. You're learning how to make clothes from scratch. You're learning the whole design process. You're learning about the history of fashion, and you're studying everything that goes into it creatively. Not so much the business side. Obviously, that didn't really come into play. You're learning more about how to work within the system of a design house.
Yeah.
You're learning how to cut patterns, sewing everything, ironing every seam as soon as you've sewn it.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because we've spoken previously when we've sat down about how my university course was very similar. It was all very great and very arty, but they never gave you that sort of, okay, this is how you take these skills and you turn it into a business.
I don't think, and it might have changed now, I'm not sure, but my degree didn't teach me how to start my own label or start my own brand.
And was that the sort of, in your mindset then, was that the goal?
Yeah. I think all of us had that goal because we're so creative, and at the time we had so much passion for the kind of work we wanted to put out there. We all had our own aesthetics, and there were other brands we'd resonate with, and maybe those were the ones that we'd aim to get jobs in at the start. But I think all of us had that dream of starting our own label. But you're not taught how to do that. You're taught how to work for other people and work your way up the ladder.
So you stuck the course out, but how
did?
You graduated, but how were you feeling at the end of that intense course?
Just wrung out.
Burnt out.
I remember throughout the last year I was getting ill a lot.
Oh wow.
And that, again, it was a bit of a snowball effect. It delayed me in my deadlines, and then you have to catch up, and you're not sleeping, you're not really eating, you're just non-stop.
Thing of stress of, I haven't finished that and I feel ill, and yeah.
Yeah, and so that last year was a huge struggle. And at the end, I think I was so burnt out, I didn't care about doing the next thing, which would have been to get a job in the industry.
So what did you do, Ava?
So I took a flight to Australia.
Yeah,
before I even had the graduation ceremony. I think it was 2 weeks after my final deadline. I'd kind of started putting things in place to do this already. I'd worked with kids before and I really enjoyed it. And I thought, what can I do to I had no money at the time.
Yeah, of course you was.
Everything was spent. I'd probably spent as much as I would on a small car on my final graduate collection, like all of us did. And I didn't have the money to do anything other than put a bit away to get a flight.
But you were done, right? After uni, the burnout, the stress, the illnesses, it's just like, no.
The last thing I wanted to do was get a job in design. I think maybe I was a bit influenced at people that had started traveling already, like people I was meeting, and maybe they'd had a summer in Australia and did that backpacking thing. And I thought, how can I do this? And then I went in au pair for a family for a few months and then started traveling. And it was the first time I'd done anything like that.
And you're on your own, right?
Yeah, on my own.
That's brave.
Had flights, had holidays with family. I'd never really had a holiday with friends at the time. I think I was 21. I'd never done a friend's holiday. I just thought, okay, let's see what happens in Australia.
You must have, but I mean, is that a reflection of how you were feeling psychologically, that you were just almost like, fuck it, I just need
to
out.
Get away.
And to go the other side of the world on your own, not even to take a mate just as a little bit of a comfort blanket. No, I'm gone. I'm done.
Yeah.
It's quite a brave move.
I think I've always liked to do things that scare me, and having that independence is really important to me, knowing that I can do anything I want off my own back. Sometimes it's to my detriment, because I'm still learning to ask for help when I need it. Yeah, at the time, I just knew I needed to get away and experience something different.
So how long were you au pairing for, and how long before you went, right, enough of au pairing, I want to go and see Australia, see the landscape, which I think will you agree with me, seeing somewhere like Australia, the natural landscape, me looking at your work now, there's definitely correlations between that, but obviously we probably haven't found that synergy yet.
No, it was the first time I went somewhere where I wasn't living in a city, for one. It was the first time I went to the au pair family. I was living by the coast with them. It was such a different lifestyle. It was a bit of a shock, really, that people live like this and go to the beach for a walk after work or have barbecues.
And how are you feeling?
Sundays.
Obviously, we've just talked about how burnt out you were. What's your mental health like? What's your physical health like after being in the sun, vitamin D, energizing, the no stress of course, deadlines and things? How are you feeling at this point?
I think it was a bit of everything, where I was so excited to think, well, what can I do? Where do I want to go? Where do I want to travel? And for the first time, I was meeting other people like me who were so keen to travel and see Australia, see Indonesia, and wherever they wanted to go. And I think I soaked a lot of that in, where I thought, oh, I can do this. I can go travel. I can go like meet people and take a trip with them. Now, I don't know how I did it, because I think as you get older, you naturally get a bit more cautious.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said. I mean, I know your story a bit more, but I think you're braver than you think you are. But we'll get to that. So you spent time in Australia. What was the thing that brought you back? You saw some beautiful stuff. You travelled all over the place. And how long were you there for?
About between a year and a half.
So what was the thing that brought you back?
I think in the last few months I was there, it was kind of in the back of my mind, where I was seeing the friends I'd graduated with kind of getting their first steps into their careers. They were getting those first jobs, moving to London or moving to other fashion capitals. And I almost felt like I was lagging behind. I was going to miss out if I didn't do it now. And although being in Australia and traveling and seeing so much, I knew it was an experience I wasn't going to get back. So I did try to make the most of it.
Niggling thing at the back of your mind. I suppose you've worked so hard on something and you have got that goal or that end thing in mind.
I still had that passion for it. I still wanted to pursue it. So I thought, okay, it's time to go back and try and get my foot in the door.
You've a year out, you come back, and you're coming back to...
So I went back to Leicester where my mum was living.
Back to mum.
Started looking for jobs.
What does that look like? I mean, and where are you looking? I can't imagine, come and work in Christian Dior fashion house, or...
Well, this is it.
It's not quite that easy, right? Or...
Maybe things have changed now, but at the time, unless you could work for a fashion house like that for free and do it for a year or two as an intern,
yep.
And then work your way up in those fashion houses, there wasn't really a way in where you could get that job without having 2 years of experience already as an intern. So my first job was in, trying to think, how would you describe it? It was like a high street supplier. So we supplied to all the regular high street stores. At the time, I was there as a designer. I wasn't an intern. So it was a really great first job where I could see how everything worked and be doing it. I was being paid. My
Not
first
huge
job
amounts,
was,
I wouldn't imagine, but you're being paid, like you said.
18K.
How much?
18K
in London?
Yeah.
Wow.
Living in a house share. But the job, I don't think there would have been a better first job, because I had a lot of responsibilities straight off the bat. I had my own accounts. I had a great head of design who was probably the best mentor I had in fashion.
So they must have seen, like, as I say, for a first job in fashion, they must have seen something in you that was possibly different to, I mean, I don't know, interns that have to work for free. Like you say, you've got a lot of responsibility.
It was a small company. So I think everyone had to pull their weight in this company. It wasn't like they couldn't afford to take on assistant designers that were just learning the ropes, because everyone on board had to be handling at their own accounts. They had to be doing these things and making change and getting those designs out, getting orders in, talking to suppliers. But I learned everything so quickly and had so much responsibility that I think it propelled me a lot for the next few jobs I had.
Okay, so you've come back, your fashion career's starting, should we say. You've got this good job in London working for this fashion house and doing design and having your own accounts. Then
I moved to China.
I didn't know how to quite jump into that, but then I just casually moved to China. Can you just elaborate on that for us? Because you're working a relatively stable job, I would imagine, in London, where people in their first job are thinking, I've got this made. And you go, let's go to China.
Yeah, I was already looking for that next step in my career, maybe going to a more established brand.
Why? What were the feelings inside you that were like, as I say, you've just said to me that this, for a first job out of fashion college, this is quite a good job, responsible.
Really, I think it was ambition. I wanted to work. I was ready to work in one brand that I really resonated with, and just, again, climb that ladder, but get to that next spot where I'm in a brand I like to work with. I'm not working for multiple. I wanted to really hone in and take that next step. And then I was offered a job it's a Middle Eastern brand, but the design office was based in China. So at the time I thought, well, for one, it's a great next step where I can work with a premium brand that's going to give me a lot of experience. Not only working directly with suppliers again, that I'd already been doing it, but this would take it to another level because I was in China where majority of the suppliers were for this brand I would be working for. And again, I love traveling. I hadn't been to China before. I hadn't been to any supplier trips or anything out there. I'd been to India, but I hadn't been to China. So
you thought, I'll take a job
let's
there.
try it. I didn't really, again, ignorance is bliss. I knew there'd be a bit of a language struggle there. I was in Guangzhou. I wasn't in. Oh, it's ridiculous. It's terrible.
Okay.
It was terrible then. It's even worse now. It's non-existent now.
Okay, yeah, of course.
But no, I was in Guangzhou at the time. I wasn't in Shanghai or Beijing, where you had a bit more of that kind of international scene going on.
Sorry, where were you?
Guangzhou.
And my limited Chinese geography, where's that?
It's down towards the south.
Okay.
So it's just across the sea from Hong Kong. Nice and hot.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, so that was another shock to the system.
But you say, Ava, it was a shock to the system, but it was,
it was a shock I gave myself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's something, have you always had quite that drive? Or is there something else?
I think I just like to do what scares me. I almost have to prove to myself that I can do it.
Why? Where does that come from?
I think seeing my mum be so independent, and when I was really young, I thought my mum can do everything. Like, she does everything on her own, and at the time I didn't know it was a struggle doing it. I just saw how independent she was, and she was like a superhuman to me.
And that's obviously instilled such great insights and morals within you, because it's given you that same courage, belief. I mean, my mum, single mum as well. So I can relate to that, in seeing your parents as these superhuman people that just sort of get on with all the things, and that's great. You're almost fearless because of it, right?
I wouldn't say fearless. I'd say
brave.
Doing it
despite the fear.
In spite of it. I think I always knew I wanted to travel. That's something my mum didn't really get to do. She was raising 2 kids in her 20s. She wasn't traveling. She wasn't finding a career, and she didn't have that luxury. But she made sure to set us up so we had the opportunity.
Talking about mum, how do you think mum's feeling when she's I mean, I'm sure she's very proud to see you go off to London, to Australia, to now China to go and work, but she's got to miss her baby, right? It's got to be tough.
Yeah, I think it was. I think she has always had the faith in me that I can do whatever I want to do. And that's always helped. As a mother, she's naturally going to be worried for me, but I don't think that ever let her hold me back. She never kind of put that onto me, which I'm really grateful for. Other people would be asking her, kind of, aren't you worried? Aren't you going to miss her? But she never let that influence how...
Like she said on your phone to your uncle, whatever Ava does, she'll be successful at. So, okay, we're digressing again. Let's go back to China. So, it still sounds like a mildly strange sentence. So let's go back to China, Ava, and talk about your fashion career in China. So you're out there. How long are you in China doing this job?
So I had a year's contract.
So another year.
Yeah.
Away from
everything
friends.
seemed to work in a year.
But like you say, you're almost dipping your toe in the water and trying, or being brave enough to try all these things, right?
Yeah, I think at the time, one, I wanted it for my career and the experience, but I don't think I realised how much I'd get out of it. I found such a great community out there of expats. I fell into this kind of Latin community that, again, was dancing a lot. And
that's cool.
Going for there's always salsa nights going on, and this dance teacher, Gerardo, would kind of have a free kind of salsa night twice a week in his studio for free. Anyone can just come and dance, and he created such a great community out of it. And expats out there, we really appreciated that, because
culturally, the difference is so huge as well, isn't it? From Western culture to Chinese culture, that you almost need that expat community just to go,
this is it. And with such a language barrier.
Yeah, of course.
It was amazing having people I could speak English with, but also learn about their cultures. And the Latin culture is amazing. And they're such friendly, open people. They treat everyone like family. And that, I think, shaped me a lot. Being around that and just absorbing that energy.
And what else do you think you took away from that year in fashion? I mean, community and making beautiful friends and experiences, stuff like that. But creatively, what are you sort of taking away from this year in China? I mean, apart from the obvious that you can't get away from the fact that every day you're seeing something that you've probably never seen before. Culturally, we're so different. You're visually seeing this and that type of food and this crazy whatever. What, are there other things apart from community and stuff? I mean, you're working in the fashion industry, but you're inherently a creative.
Yeah, I think it was such a fast pace in that company that there wasn't really a lot of time to be creative. It was very much it was probably the most formulaic type of design I could do in a company, because you're constantly kind of trying to get the next collection ready, trying to get it out there. And it, with a brand, you're very...
There's constraints,
they're almost,
right?
you're very limited to that brand identity.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, because there's less room to experiment. But I think I realized I was gravitating so much to almost the print design and that kind of, again, the more painterly, like arty parts of the design world. I was always gravitating toward the prints and doing that part of the design work. I was doing everything else too, but I found that that's what I enjoyed the most, and that's what I was wanting to do more of. And again, looking back, I think that just I didn't realize it at the time, but I was looking for a way to paint and draw and sketch, and
I think having all these different inputs, being able to see all these things, is all just adding to your visual library, right? Whether you know it at the time or not. No. Now, you probably look back and go, oh, okay, I'm getting that reference because of that. But at the time, you're just taking all these things in. So at the end of this year-long contract in China where, in your own words, you haven't had the chance to be hugely creative, what was it? Just another Ava Khera moment where she goes, oh, I fancy a change now. Done China for a year.
Yeah, I think I was definitely burnt out from the work because it was so fast. There was no kind of time to relax. If I wasn't in the office designing, I was traveling to suppliers. I was trying to kind of fit in a bit of my own travel with some friends at the time. So anytime I did have a holiday, it wasn't to relax. It was to go travel. It was to experience. And it was great, but I wasn't stopping.
And winding down for you at this point, you're not creating. I suppose you're not painting, you're not drawing. You're just work's work. Free time is free time.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And I don't think I really clicked on why I wasn't happy with it necessarily.
Okay.
I think I was just in that mindset that a lot of people get into, that, oh, in my next job, I just need to find something a bit different, or I just need to climb to that next step, or I'm a senior designer, or I'm a head of design, and then it will be okay. Then I'll feel like I'm happier with this job, or I'm happier in this industry. It took me a little while to realize a few years later that wasn't the case. I think you only realize once you've kind of climbed that ladder that it might be the wrong one.
But at least you've gone and experienced those things to know that they're not for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think at the time I was so focused on making it as a designer that I didn't really stop to think, is it what I want to do? So it's almost that sunk cost fallacy. You've spent years studying it. You've spent years kind of in the grind of working your way up that you don't question. You think, of course, this is what I want to do. I've spent years working towards this. And I didn't stop. I carried on. I left China, came back to England and started
the next phase.
Freelancing.
And this is back in London,
phase.
right?
So
we're guessing, what's this, 2019, 18, 19, or was this later?
So this was 2018, I want to say. Yeah, so that I started freelancing for like premium luxury brands.
When you say doing what? Designing or interning?
Still.
Or?
Yeah, I was still designing. I was kind of coming in to some premium and luxury brands when they needed that additional help, or when they needed a specific project for me to work on. And again, really fast paced. when it was like a more luxury label, I'd be coming in and really kind of all hands on deck situation before the runway show comes out, or fashion week. Again, just non-stop. But it was it was the first time I was freelancing. I wasn't in a full-time job. So I don't think the stability was great for me at the time. Then I did find a job in a smaller brand and I moved out of London for it. A few months later, COVID happened. So I'm in a flat by myself, not really around any friends or family. And it was the first time that I wasn't running 100 miles an hour with no space and no time.
I think that was the same for a lot of people, wasn't it?
Exactly.
It's that when you get that time to reflect, and like you've just spoken about, you know, when you're going through the mill of the day-to-day, you don't question whether fashion design or the thing that we spent so long studying or learning to become, whether that's actually still really what you want to do. And COVID sort of changed that for you, right?
It did. I think, like you said, a lot of people kind of took that time to really reflect, because when does the world stop? You know, I was still working remotely for my company, but suddenly I couldn't do the social things I wanted to do. I wasn't traveling for my job, and having that time I was alone. I wasn't living with anyone. So having so much time to myself, it probably forced me to reflect and think, am I doing the right thing here? Because even at the time, I was looking for the next job. I was thinking, what's my next move? And suddenly I couldn't take that next move. At the time I thought it might have been moving abroad again. And that came to a halt when COVID hit. So can't even tell you the first day I did it, but one day I just started painting. At the time it was in watercolors.
Did you have the stuff? Did you have the kit? Did you have the papers? Did you have the paint? So it was all there.
Yeah. I can't even tell you why, because I hadn't been able to paint for a few years. But I still kept
When you say you hadn't been able to paint, is that just because you've been so busy, or?
Yeah, I didn't take the time to do it.
You didn't take the time.
And I didn't think it was a priority in my life at the time to just sit down and paint. Well, I've got so much I need to do. And yeah, it was the first. I still carted around these watercolors and brushes. I didn't have any papers. That was an Amazon job. But I just sat down and started painting again. And at the time, I loved fashion illustrations.
Okay.
That's kind of what I was exposed to. So I just started creating some illustrations, like watercolor portraits. I didn't stop again. It became an obsession.
It became an obsession. So when did that obsession spill over and go, right, no, I'm not going back to fashion? What's the catalyst that in your brain goes, right, actually, no, now I can switch off from I wanted to be a fashion designer, or I've studied so long to be a fashion designer. Actually, no, I want to be a painter.
I think that happened quite gradually. I don't think there was a kind of moment where I thought, no, I want to make a switch. It just slowly started to form. The more I did it, the more I kind of realized I enjoy this more than I do designing. I don't get the same kind of satisfaction. I don't get that creative outlet from design that I do when I'm painting, when I'm sketching. And it was my own. I wasn't working for another brand. I didn't have to think about all these factors that come into play when you're designing for someone else. And even if I was designing for myself, there are still outside factors, because design is functional.
Yeah, there's always limitations.
It's not completely
that
creative.
Material won't do that, or
exactly.
You know.
You might be adhering to the trends. You always have to think about your customer. And that I didn't have to do that when I was painting. It was just whatever I wanted to do at the time. I could be as controlled or as crazy as I wanted to be. Whatever I was feeling can just come out.
And what is coming out at this point? I mean, I know you said fashion illustrations and watercolour portraits and stuff. What is the work that you're sort of producing, and how are you feeling about it? I know that's quite a big question, but I'm trying to get to the bottom of I'm in COVID. I'm trying to just feed my creative juices. But then obviously somewhere along the line, that gradual switch has going, oh, my passion's building, and I actually feel myself getting more animated, excited, energized by painting rather than wanting to go back and work for a fashion brand.
I think what was coming out was probably years of frustration.
Can you go deeper on that? What do you mean years of frustration?
Of not having almost that kind of control over what I was doing. Because I think even if you're being creative, you're still working for someone else. You're working a certain number of hours for an employer. Your time isn't your own. Your circumstances aren't entirely your choice sometimes. And I think all of that was coming out as someone who is very independent. I don't think it's easy to be in a full-time job because...
We're smiling at each other because I agree with you completely, and I've been my own boss for such a long time that it is so difficult. Like I say, any constraint as a creative is difficult, especially that's a constraint that's not put on you by yourself. So I think I can relate to that frustration. You're just wanting all this creativity to come out and flow from you rather than going, oh, I've got to draw within the lines, as it were, as a sort of metaphor.
As a designer, I was always adhering to a formula. And I knew that formula by heart. It was almost kind of going back to like studying in school. I knew what to put into a test. I knew what answers they were looking for. So I just did it. And it became that same thing.
And then
designing.
That becomes monotonous, right? Because there's no test, there's no experiment, there's no creativity.
No, there's
no problem
I lost
solving
any
because you know the
excitement
answer.
for it. Yeah, I think it was a lot coming out at the time. I was painting some really kind of sad portraits. I was painting couples because I think I was looking to kind of express that need for connection. And I think a lot of people were feeling that at the time.
And this is all part of developing your style, right?
Yeah.
Capturing the beauty of women, your portraits. I mean, as I said, we'll include some links to your website and your social media, but your portraits and your women that you do paint are, or you've described them, there's a hopelessness of expression in some of them. And there's this, they are very emotive. There is, dare I say, they're not happy paintings.
No.
But I think that's a beautiful darkness within them. I think that's what drew me to them. I mean, it's like nature's embrace, which is...
that's probably my happiest painting. That says something.
But I also see the sadness, and I also see the melancholy, and I also see trying to find some connection.
Mm.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about, like, I mean, obviously during COVID, you've sort of, you're building this style. The fashion background makes sense to me as to why you like to draw people, women, especially. Can we talk about the women in your work now? I mean, you've developed this style presumably since doing lots of expressiveness through COVID, and your work is, I'm pausing to say this, you say it's based on personal experiences and memories, and there is this really deep emotive feeling that I see when I look at your work. I'm not sure what I'm trying to ask you here, Ava.
I like how you've described that. I think the reason I don't like to paint something so kind of obviously sad. I don't want to paint a woman crying. I want to paint what's just lying below the surface,
and
it's coming out
it's
in
subtleties
glimpses.
of it.
It's not coming out in an outpour. It's something you need to look closely to see it. And I think that's the same with a lot of people. People struggle. I know I struggled. And it wasn't something I could be so open about. And I don't think a lot of people can be open about it, especially in their everyday lives. You just have to get up and get going and carry on. But I think for me, it's all about what's just under the surface.
I mean, we'll talk about your blog in a minute, but there's a section of your blog where you talk about the new piece that you're working on and this emotive woman leaning against a tree, and you talk about seeing the emotion of her feeling the rough bark on her back and the sort of the pain that comes with that, being emotive in the face, and just that little split second, that was the bit that you were interested in. Okay, so I guess my question is, if the work is inspired by personal memories and experiences, do you find it cathartic to paint? Is it?
It's definitely a release. And what I didn't expect to find is when people look at my work, they can instantly recognize that feeling. Because everyone's felt these things. Everyone's felt hopeless. They felt afraid. They felt insecure and lost. And I think seeing someone put that on a canvas in a way that you can really resonate with, it's a powerful thing. it's a powerful thing to realise you're not the only one who's ever felt like this, even though there are songs about this, and there are poems and writings and books and artwork.
Are you a bit of a dark soul?
I recognise the parts of me that aren't happy all the time, the parts I maybe struggle with, the insecurities I have, and I think I'm become better at recognising those things and pouring that out. I think that's more interesting to.
Do you think you've become better at recognising those things because of the painting? I mean, it's a very solitary act, painting and trying to express these emotions. And as you said it's cathartic to paint. So when you're in it alone with a canvas, you must be going through all of these feelings, emotions.
Yeah, I think it's become easier to process. It's become easier to get it out. Because I've always been writing. I've always been journaling how I'm feeling, I think. And being able to kind of write these things down and express it, that was the first time I had experience with that. And that carried on. I just didn't really realise I could do it in a visual way until I started painting.
It's beautiful. I mean, that's what drew me into the work, because I've spoken before on my blog about how I am drawn to the darker elements of life and the, dare I say, the Jungian shadow side of things. I think the bits that we hide away from people are sometimes the bits that are more interesting.
They're the bits that need to be seen, aren't they?
I agree. And it's so interesting though, Ava, because I sit opposite you and I look at you, and I mean, obviously it's an internal thing, and you externalize these emotions and these feelings on canvas. And I'm looking in the studio, I'm looking at the canvases, and God, there is this such a sadness to them, but I don't see that with you. So that's why I think, having spoken to you and knowing your history, your childhood, where you've come from, your bravery, these things that you've experienced, I admire how you show your emotion within your work, but it's not obviously you. Does that make sense? They're always very subtle. Yeah. It's all so subtle.
I think it's always going to be parts of me, but I'm naturally a private person. I think that's just, that's a making of how I've been raised. And
so then do you find maybe expressing some of these emotions in other models other than yourself easier? If you're the private person, could you do this as a self-portrait? No, you couldn't.
I wanted to try and I've always stopped myself.
How interesting.
Maybe that's my next challenge, is to do it as a self-portrait.
Is that too close to home?
Maybe
is there easier to keep that separation between, the emotions are inherently yours, or universal emotions that we all feel, but by painting them in someone else?
I think, if anything, it adds to the connection. Because if I can almost capture that little bit in a model, or someone I want to photograph, and sometimes it's really spontaneous. Yeah. Like, can I just picture you right now? I went on a boat trip in Italy. It sounds really glamorous, but it was for a friend's wedding, and we were on this boat trip, and one of the girls on it was the bride's cousin, and I'd never met her before, but we got talking, and when we stopped to have a bit of a dip in the water, I just noticed how comfortable she looked in the water and how calm she was. And I just said to her, can I photograph you? I'm having a swim, lying on the surface. She was great about it. And I'm just hanging off the end of the boat, clinging onto my phone so I don't drop it in the water, taking photos. But I think those are the moments that kind of come into play with what I'm doing, because I recognize that in someone else.
Is that a normal process? Do you just see something in someone and go, I'd love to, or do you have I suppose it varies, but do you have the process of going, I want to paint this, I see this in my mind, I need to get a red-headed model in this environment with these tones and then photograph that? Or is it a mix of both? Sometimes it's impromptu, sometimes it's...
Yeah, it varies. With the painting I'm doing now of the woman leaning against the tree, I met her, I really wanted to paint her. I didn't know how yet, but I really wanted to paint her. I loved her features and her expressions. And then I kind of set up a bit of a photo shoot in a couple different locations. She was so good about just quickly getting dressed into a different dress to then try out this location and go by this river, lie on the rocks, and do whatever I kind of fancied trying at the time. What happened was incredible, that just in the in-between moments where I'm fiddling around or trying out a different angle, her face just reflects whatever her mind has wandered to at the time. And those expressions were the ones I was looking back on from the photos and thinking, this is what I want to paint. It's nothing I can force. And I wasn't really trying to force anything on the shoot. I was just trying out different poses or seeing how she would naturally move. And it was those quiet moments that I managed to get on camera that I wanted to paint. So sometimes it's a bit of everything coming together, and you just see what you connect to.
Yeah, I mean, as a photographer, it's often those in-between moments, exactly like you say, which are the better images rather than the person when they're conscious of the camera being on them or whatever that might be. They're much more interesting and emotive.
Yeah, and the great thing with painting is I can then influence it further to exaggerate something or exaggerate her posture to really tell that story, or changing her surroundings a little bit, the landscape around her, or like in the cave painting, how the cave kind of curves around her. I've manipulated that to really show that story.
Yeah, and all of this that we're talking about, we'll put in the show notes, and we'll add the images of Ava's work and all the links. I want to go back to that. I'm looking at this cave picture, and I want to go back to the nature thing. Why are the women always or often in nature?
So that's something I'm exploring right now for the series I'm working on. And it started off with just the one painting of her in the cave, and I realized there's more I want to try. I want to explore the relationship of how that woman on the boat trip was in the water compared, like how her nature just changed. She just became really relaxed. She was fully in the moment. And those are the relationships and how that plays. That's what I want to explore right now. Like how someone feels when they're in a field, this open sky and all this space.
Yeah, and I'm having read your blog and stuff. I understand that there is that disconnect, isn't there, with the modern world, that we're so busy by putting people back into nature. And I'm going to use, I mean, you write beautifully, but talking about nature's embrace, the painting whispers a gentle invitation to seek solace in the embrace of the natural world, a reminder of connection to earth and nature. Is that something that's important? That sort of, I mean, I know it's something you're exploring now, but
yeah, it's
like
almost reminding myself, if anything.
We're so fast paced and everything's so fast paced, and like you say, as artists and creatives, you've got to be every job title. To stop and actually reflect on nature, I think, is very important.
Yeah, I think we've become so removed as a society, a lot of us, that a lot of the things that we think are important now tend to fall away when you're outside of the city. Or,
for sure.
Like if you go camping, you're not really thinking about what you look like or putting your makeup on, because who cares?
And
who's going to see you? Who's going to judge you, you know?
Does that, where you're travelling and seeing nature and seeing some of these beautiful places around the world, has really brought that home?
Yeah, I think it's how travelling, and it's a very different lifestyle to being not just working in a city, but working in fashion, where you're constantly thinking about image, thinking about how I'm presenting myself and how other people are seeing me. Whereas none of that is at play if I'm just traveling or going through one of the biggest national parks in Australia, or hanging out on the beach with my friends and having a barbecue, or like being with family. It's none of those things are important to me in those settings.
Yeah.
All I'm thinking about is having a good time with the people I'm with,
being
and
present,
feeling
I guess,
awed
right?
by everything around us. And it brings you back to the simplicity of sometimes how life should be. We're so overstimulated now.
Oh, God,
There's all these statistics about it.
Yeah.
And we're not meant to live like that. We're not meant to be constantly switched on and at everyone's beck and call.
Do you find then that the painting is quite a good escape from that intense, overstimulated world, where you can just flow state in on a painting and just go, right, everything else is blinkers on? I know that can have its detriments as well, because you were supposed to meet your partner for dinner 3 hours ago and you're still deep painting. But But do you understand what I mean? That kind of ability to get into that flow state and just lock out the outside world.
I think I've always been good at kind of locking into that state of mind and that hyper focus almost. I almost attribute that to how I've managed to kind of become a painter and like started oil painting in the last few years and kind of really kind of stepped up my technique to a point where I can be a professional artist. And especially what I do is I'm not like a photorealist. I do think of it as painterly realism, but being able to teach myself to do that, I think it comes down to, everyone says it's always practice, practice, practice. But I don't think it is just that. I think it's intentional practice of constantly analysing yourself, thinking, how do I need to improve this? What do I need to learn? Because you can't just practice the same thing over again
and
expect
that,
the same results.
But that shows the drive that I recognise in you.
Yeah, but I think I've always been ambitious and I've always had such an expectation of myself. I think, I know I can do that because if someone else can do it, if someone else can paint like
Completely
that or
agree.
paint to that level, I can do it. I just need to figure out how. I think that's always been my drive and how I stay focused.
Do you feel like you've got to where you are faster, or, I mean, in your brain it's probably slower than you should, but realistically looking at your trajectory of your creative career as an artist, do you think you've moved quite quickly?
Probably. I know
that's difficult to see.
It is, but I think if I can try and be impartial, I think I have taught myself quite quickly, but I've definitely kind of put those hours in after work or on the weekends, because it does become an obsession. I will lie awake at night thinking about how I need to paint that nose a bit better.
Yeah.
Or what can I do to round out her face a little more? And it's those details, I think, as a creative, you're so hooked on the details that you won't be able to turn your mind off.
And like you say, I mean, again, we can relate on this. You're a self-diagnosed perfectionist, so that's hard, right?
Yeah.
So knowing when to stop, or knowing when it's done, knowing when it's finished, is that something you find difficult, or is there some gut response to you when you look at a painting, you go, no, that's done, I can't touch that anymore? Because there is, with that perfectionist mentality, oh, if I just do this little tweak here, or just add to that highlight there, or if I just do this there.
I think it's always a struggle towards the end of a painting, but I think you can only know when to stop once you've gone too far a few times. You don't know until you know.
Have you done that before? Have you ruined paintings going too far?
I always have to put in too much detail or render it too realistically to then pare it back and think, no, I need to. And then I spend hours undoing what I've done. Yeah. And making it a bit more painterly, a bit more abstract, or how I kind of want it to be, rather than how perfectionist in me naturally wants it to look. But it
is hard, isn't it, when you've got that vision in your mind of how you do want something to look, to just let it go almost. And I can imagine, I mean, with photography for me and the other things I'm doing, it's a little bit different, but with adding another brushstroke, it's a difficult one.
Yeah, I almost have to let myself think of these works as unfinished in my mind.
Okay.
So I always have to think, no, I can stop now. I can't remember the quote. I read something about how a painting it's always unfinished to some degree, because you can always do more. So I think I have to kind of live with that feeling a bit unfinished. Like, I could do more to it, but I'm not going to. I'm making a decision. Completely. Yeah.
My next question is, I asked whether you felt like that you'd moved quickly with your oil painting, because I look around and yes, I understand you've always been creative. You've always had that inherent skill. But to teach yourself oils to such a high level in such a short time is so difficult. The way your work seems, I'm looking at your work and it seems like you've painted for years and years and years and years. There's an experience, and to be able to get that emotion and quality of light and all those things in oil painting so quickly, you've obviously got this skill set, and that's being recognised. So was it last year, runner-up in the Women in Art?
Yeah, that happened in September.
Tell us a little bit more about that. So that must be quite a good feeling, right? Good for the confidence and the imposter syndrome that we all as creatives suffer.
It was incredible.
Can you tell us a little
I
bit
didn't
more
really
about
have
what
any
it was?
expectations. So the Women in Art Prize, it's been going for a few years now, and the competition, the prize is only getting bigger and better, more that goes into it. Shout out to Gabriella, who organises the Women in Art Prize. One, it was a great experience being one of the finalists and getting the recognition, seeing my work on the walls with these incredible artists.
Because there was exhibitions down in London and
yeah, had an exhibition in London where they announced the prize winners and won the runner-up prize and Flux Award.
So that meant that you're a runner-up in the Women in Art Award. So magazine features galore, Home and Gardens, Flux magazine. And this is all in your first full-time year as an artist, really. Yes, you've been creating, but that must be quite a good feeling in your first full-time year to have that recognition and just that validation, dare I say. I've talked about artist validation, how we all need it.
Yeah, it was incredible to kind of have a painting of mine recognized like that. I think what meant a lot was people seeing how much emotion is in it.
Mm.
And just talking to me about it and recognizing it without me saying anything is people coming up to me and telling me, oh my God, I see this in this painting.
And you talk about that
it reminds me of this story that I've been through. And that was the first time I experienced that.
That's important for you, right? It's more important for you how other people see the picture and the emotion that they feel rather than knowing actually your emotion behind it, right?
Yeah,
I think that's art generally.
I think it's not important for people to know my specific story as it relates to a painting. That's not what it's there for.
Yeah.
Me putting it out and painting that's where my story almost stops.
Do you feel that
someone else can project onto it?
You've exercised those demons or whatever's inside you onto canvas, and that's for you. It's not for anyone else.
Yeah, I'd say so. Because I don't paint with the end customer in mind. That doesn't happen. And I don't think any
great art's about you, right? It's not about
paint like that. No, it starts with me, but then the amazing thing is that it ends with all these people also almost seeing their story in it, and whoever ends up buying that painting will be able to project that for as long as they keep the painting, and that's amazing.
What's the painting called
this one is Lost to Daydreams.
Lost to Daydreams was the one that you won the runner-up in the...
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll get a lovely picture of that and we'll add that in the show notes as well, because, again, these beautiful, melancholic, emotive portraits of women. And as I say, I think it's interesting, having spoken to you and the stuff that we've spoken about on the podcast and stuff that we've spoken about privately, that I can see shapes your work, and we've discussed shapes your work. But like you say, it's not important for the viewer. It's more important for the viewer to have their own response to it.
Yeah, I think that all falls into the experience of seeing paintings.
Do you think that's art in general? Do you think it's always got to be about the viewer response, whether it's good or bad?
It depends on the kind of art.
Yeah.
It depends on the message. Yeah, I think visual art especially is one of those things that artists don't do it for the market. We don't paint thinking this is the kind of customer that's going to buy it.
Yeah. Got to paint from your gut, right?
Because
paint
it is so personal. This is it. Because it is so personal, that's the journey we have to take, but that's not the end purpose, almost. It kind of has another life after you've painted it.
Do you think that's an important journey that every artist and creative should take, a bit more internally? Like you say, there's people working in creative industries just meeting briefs, but actually there's something to be said for getting what's inside the soul or darker elements out.
I don't think I can speak for other creatives. I think some people find fulfillment in designing for a brand or designing as part of this bigger collective to put this out into the world, and that's their purpose. I don't think it can be generalized for all creatives like that.
Yeah.
I think it just depends on how you find fulfillment in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because some people feel like they're serving in a better way by being part of this bigger collective with a joint goal.
I just see quite a lot of bravery in you to go into those deeper, darker elements that it's never easy for anybody to go through. You talked about things like that and having that ability to think slightly differently and be able to analyse yourself and your emotions a little bit more. I think that's a really good skill to have. And to see that expressed on your canvases is really, really beautiful. Really beautiful. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the future now. So this recognition, what you've had this recognition in your first year of being a full-time artist. So what's the sort of plan for you? Do you have a plan? I mean, you do commissions and you've got your own collections that you're working and your own work that you're working on. What's the sort of moving forward? I mean, I know you've started a wonderful blog that I recommend everyone checks out, The Painter's Pathway, which is, what's the tagline underneath it? The Painter's Pathway, creating, oh God, I've got to consult my notes now.
I don't know.
Ava, help me out. Painter's Pathway, Navigating a Career in Arts, which is Ava's new blog on her website. We've spoken about blogging before. It's not easy, but I actually, reading the blog, you've got some real gems of stuff in there. There's stuff that you can give advice on that someone starting their career as an artist or a creative might find really useful. And we've all got something to give and that we're all in this together.
And that's how I started learning, being self-taught. I wasn't learning from artists that were 20, 25 years into their career. I was learning from artists that were just a few steps ahead, that can really recall what they were doing at the start.
Which is so important. And we're so lucky to live in a time that we can almost see that now. Like, you can go onto YouTube and probably type in, don't take this the wrong way, but oil painting for dummies. Do you know what I mean? And you could have a start at least. Does that make sense?
Those fundamentals, I think when you've been doing it for so long, and I've recognized this with dancing or sketching or anything I've been doing for a long time, that I almost can't teach those fundamentals because they become so instinctive that you can't even break it down to yourself anymore, yet alone teach it to someone else. Yeah. So I think I've realized it's important to talk about what I'm learning as I'm learning it, or as I've kind of started to learn something and found, oh, okay, this works really well for me, or I like painting in this style, or doing an underpainting like this, and using this kind of color palette right now is really great for these paintings I'm working on.
Well, in the latest
and that's
blog,
something I won't remember a few years from now.
Exactly. And even down to the latest blog about the blank canvas, which is a daunting place for any creative to sit in front of a blank canvas, and the idea of you being able to just play and doing a sketchboard. So having that ability to play and be free, and those things are really useful for young artists, young creatives to see.
Yeah, and it's a practice that a lot of experienced artists do naturally. And it's not something that gets talked about because it's just an initial part of the process.
Yeah.
And it's not even the most interesting part for a lot of artists. It's something you think about at the start, but then it goes because it's done and you're moving on to the actual work. Yeah. But I realized how important it is to do that and not rush into, because you have so many ideas as an artist that you don't know where to start. You've got all these doubts about, how am I going to paint the trees like this, or how is her figure going to look in this kind of sunlight? And you're trying to figure out all these problems. And this latest blog was about how doing a little market or a little study, whether you're trying to work out the composition, and then you're thinking, okay, what kind of color palette am I using here? And how is the light going to bounce and reflect?
That playing giving you the ability to do all the experiments you need before you feel like you have to commit to the final piece, right?
Yeah, because there'll always be more to work out when you move on to the final painting. But having some of those bigger questions that come up at the start that can almost stop you from creating the work, because you're thinking, I'm not sure how I can do this, or if I do it wrong, it's then going to ruin the painting and I'll have to start over. Or there's a lot that kind of comes into my mind that can stop me from acting. So having a small study that if it doesn't work, if it looks like crap, I don't care. No one's going to see it if I don't want them to. Because when you start working on bigger canvases like I'm doing now, there's so much pressure because, one, you're spending a lot more money on the materials. The woman in the cave, I keep calling it that. I never call it by the title.
Nature's Embrace.
To my friends, I keep saying the cave painting, and they're like, Ava, you need to stop that, because it just, in my mind, I think of like stickmen on a cave wall.
Yeah.
But
No,
with
it's much
Nature's
more beautiful
Embrace,
than that.
that took 2 months of consistent work.
Yeah.
And when you're putting that much time and energy into something, you can't
Yeah.
help but have expectations. So writing about the process of creating a little study before I get into the final work, I know how much that helps me right now.
Yeah.
And maybe further down the line, it will be so natural to do it that I won't even consider talking about it.
And I think it's great that you're writing about those things because, as we say, it's what we forget as creatives. I mean, I've been a photographer for 20 plus years and I still sit there and think, no, I haven't got anything to teach anybody. And that's absolute nonsense.
Right.
The experience that we've got is absolutely invaluable and could teach people on the early chapters of their creative career more than we could ever possibly imagine. So what you're doing, I've got a lot of respect for. And I suppose essentially that's why I'm doing the podcast. If I can speak to inspiring people who've done it, like you said, when you were a kid, there was no one in front of you to go, oh, they've made it as an artist. Now we're in a much more different time, you know.
Even showing the journey.
Exactly.
Because seeing someone who's now become successful and is having all these shows every year in these amazing galleries, seeing that can almost be too daunting to think, I can do that.
We forget sometimes that people who are that far down their career are on their chapter 50 and we're on our chapter 3. So we're trying to compare, and you know, comparison the thief of joy, when we all do it, but we're looking at the artist down there going, oh my God, I wish I'd had their career. But actually you haven't seen all the hard work, blood, sweat and tears that they've had to put in to get to that level.
All the years of being rejected from those galleries that now represent them.
This is why I was saying things to you about your first year being almost so successful. I mean, I look at Creative Noahland and I've had a few things in exhibitions and I had some photos in an exhibition in Barcelona. And if someone had said to me this time last year, you'll have work in exhibitions and you'll be flying out to Barcelona to see some of your photographs, I'd have said, not a hope in hell. And that's why I think, and I've got almost 20 years photography career, commercial, admittedly, and then sort of trying to find my way as an artist and creative while balancing that thing. That's why I think you've had such an awesome first year, really, when you made the decision. But that's down to your drive, your ability, obviously, your passion.
Yeah, and I think I put myself in a position where I didn't do it slowly. I spent a few years painting on the side of my job. I'd sell prints on a small Etsy shop, and that almost gave me a bit of courage. But I wasn't oil painting yet. I wasn't doing what I'm doing now. And because I wanted to do it, and I knew this is going to take hours of my time and hours of dedication to even just get myself to a standard where I can make it a business, where I can take on professional commissions, I didn't give myself any other choice. I left design and I made it a bit of a clean break.
If you had to make sacrifices then would you say, to get to this point?
I'd say so.
Can you elaborate? What sort of sacrifices are you making to essentially fulfill your dream of being an artist?
For a lot of my time, my resources, everything for a while is going into making this happen and making it a success and making it a business as well. Now it's my income. Now it has to do well, you know. It's not something I can put out into the ether and think, oh, whatever happens, happens. I don't have the luxury to think like that if I want this to be my career.
Do you think that pressure is a good thing or a bad thing?
A bit of both. I think it definitely, when you forcefully put yourself out of your comfort zone, where you don't have anything to fall back on, it forces you to do the things you've been putting off.
Yeah.
And I'm still bad at that. I still have to put myself in situations that I almost don't want to.
But we've spoken about that before. It's like you say, because we have to have, in an ideal world, you'd have an agent, you'd have a marketeer, you'd have a social media person, you'd have an accountant. You just sit there on canvas painting all day long, doing what you love. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that, does it? So you have to go, oh, I've got to put myself on. I'm quite an introvert, actually. I don't really want to be on social media. We've spoken about this before. And the things that you have to do, because people buy from people and people want to know the story about the artist. People want to know the story about the work. People want to feel connected. But it's not easy.
No, it's not easy. It's a really vulnerable thing. You're not just selling. You're not just creating a product to putting out to market. This is probably the most personal form of expression.
It's very different, isn't it? Like you say, you can put out a dress, a t-shirt, a bit of fashion, but you're putting your
but it
soul
doesn't
out on
really
canvas.
reflect
No,
you.
exactly.
You can create that separation, but yeah, as a creative, it's very hard to. You almost have to realize your art doesn't define you.
Yeah,
and that's hard to do.
God, that's a whole other podcast. Christ,
Exactly.
how the art doesn't define you. Try telling any creative that you're only as good as your last piece is what I was always told, and that's not true at all. It's like
no, you can create your best work yet, and then the next one you're thinking, bloody hell, what the hell have I just done?
Yeah,
that felt like a waste of a week.
But the important thing is just to keep doing the thing, right?
Yeah,
keep doing it. Just keep doing it.
And you're always going to have so many ideas. You're going, I have so much that I want to do. I've got about 4 or 5 paintings that I'm ready to put onto the canvas. But some of them might not work out. And
as we evolve as humans and as people,
process.
As we evolve as humans and as people, those ideas that we might have had a year ago that we thought was a great idea, we've changed. That idea is not relevant anymore. It's, so we have to be constantly thinking. So, okay, that sort of leads me on nicely to next projects.
Really, I want to make a bit more of an impact with my work. I want it to be able to directly help women, whether that's somehow having women with these stories to tell as models in my work, or I base paintings on them and tell their story. Because it's a vulnerable thing to do, is putting yourself into a painting. I mean, I haven't been able to do it for myself, so if these women are brave enough to do it, I can only admire them.
Do you think you are brave?
I think looking back, I can see where I've been brave. It's hard to think of myself as brave in the moment. Other people will tell me I'm being brave, and I don't feel it because I feel terrified.
But I think that's also hugely inspiring, because it's having researched this, there is I see a huge amount of bravery in there, and bravery is exactly that. It's not feeling the fear. It's you feel the fear, but you do it anyway. I mean, look at your agency. You've moved to London, moved to Australia, moved to China, ready to change things at a blink of a hat, and evolutionary psychology alone, our brain is designed to keep us safe and try and avoid change as best as possible. Whereas you're like, nope, now's the time, we've got to change the scenery, change the environment, change the input. Hugely admirable. And to have the bravery to go, right, no, not fashion anymore. I'm going to be an artist. This is what's calling me. This is what's in my soul.
I think it's always felt like there's something else that's more important than what I'm doing right now. And
what about now? Do you still feel that now?
Right now there's a vision of, I think what scares me more is not living to my potential. I think every artist knows, and I know what I can be capable of, and I think that's what I'm always going to be chasing.
And do you think you still, I think I know the answer to this, do you think you suffer from imposter syndrome sometimes? I think we all as creatives still do. But does that get easier? Because I mean, I wrote recently in one of my blogs about how you've got to outwork that self-doubt. Just keep giving yourself undeniable evidence to show yourself that you are who the fucking hell you say you are. And you've done that in droves, but I know it's very hard to...
It's stacking the proof, isn't it?
Stacking the proof, exactly that.
Yeah, I think it helps, because now that I think, can I do this? Like, this thing I want to do, can I do it? And then I almost have to remind myself, I've already done something else that's probably even harder.
But do you forget, are you like me, do you forget that in the moment, and do you need sometimes someone to re-jog your memory going, hang on a minute?
And my partner's really good at kind of making me realise what I can do. And
in what sense?
How?
Because I think that's a huge important, having, like we've talked about, like this, having a little community, having your support network, having your cheerleaders, having the people shouting your name when you're not in the room is so important as a creative.
Yeah.
Well, not just as any human being. So what is it that you found in your partner? Because he's a Matt as well, right?
Yeah.
What a legend. He's obviously a legend.
He is.
What is it that you and Matt have that gives you that confidence?
I think a quality that he has that I wish I had sometimes is, can I swear?
Yeah.
He's really good at cutting through the bullshit and telling me exactly what I need to hear. And sometimes he'll be so honest, and he'll tell me what I don't want to hear sometimes. And that's
What you don't
That's
want to hear,
even
but what you
better.
actually need to hear.
Yeah, what
of
I
course.
need to hear.
That sounds like a good quality
And
person
sometimes
to
in
have.
the moment, I really don't want to hear it, but that's how much he wants me to do well, and that's how much he cares.
Brilliant.
Is that he's willing to not just be a safe space, but also be the one to push me when someone else might just give me a compliment or give me just a bit of reassurance. Yeah. He's the one who'll give me a kick up the butt sometimes.
Good work. And shout out Matt for that, because as I say, we all as creatives need that creative cheerleader that's just got our back, and like you say, is going to treat us honestly and go, mate, that's shit, or that's amazing, but, or, you know, whatever those things are. I want to talk a little bit more about your blog. You're going to carry that on? You're going to try and, have you set yourself any targets for how much of a blog you're going to write, or just as and when you feel like it?
Well, I almost have to work backwards a little bit, because there's so much I can write about or want to put out, and it's just organizing those thoughts in a way that can be put into a blog. So I'm probably thinking twice a month I can make those thoughts coherent enough to write.
I get it completely. And just to say, I know you'll be very humble about this because you already have, but you do write very beautifully. I like a lot of the way you express things. There's some really lovely, you know, the hopelessness of expression and a whisper to nature, all these wonderful ways of putting things. It's really resonated with me.
Thank you.
I have got a little closing tradition on the podcast. It's like I always ask the artist or the interviewee to give us a quote. I like to leave the listeners with something that gives us something positive to, not that, you know, everything that we've spoken about is positive.
Yeah.
Have you got a quote that sticks and resonates with you?
I do, and it's a bit of a long quote, so I've had to actually write it out because I won't do it justice if I try to say it off the top of my head. But it's probably it was the first time someone had put into words what I was too scared to realize for myself. And the quote goes like this: "Our greatest fear, it is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You're a child of God. Your playing small doesn't serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that others won't feel insecure around you. We were born to manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others." That's by Marion Williamson.
I mean, so much of that, we spoke about it when you told me what quote you were going to do. So much of that hits home for me. You know, our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond all measure. It's like...
Yeah, I think we're almost scared of our potential.
Yeah.
We're scared of how much we can do, because what if we fall short?
Yeah, but what if we fly?
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing, isn't it? That's a brilliant quote, and I think one that will resonate with a lot of people. A final one. We like the spider web of the Creative Noahland podcast to extend. We like the guest to suggest someone in your network that you think might be an interesting or inspiring guest to come and talk on the Creative Noahland podcast. So have you got someone in mind?
So I would nominate Stephen Rogers, who's another fellow artist. He's a phenomenal painter with so much experience and so much to put out into the world. Everything he cares about, he does it so well. His work is just, you can see years of dedication to this craft. That's inspiring for me.
Great. Well, we love a fellow inspiring creative to come on the podcast. I suppose that leads me just to say, Ava, thank you. This has been so interesting.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was
finally
great conversation.
Got the time to sit down with you that we've been trying to do for a while, and I hope that people listen to this and can see that sometimes you've got to be brave. Sometimes you've got to do... I mean, people can take away from what they want from the podcast, but I think you are a fantastic role model, not only for creators, but for young women. And I'm hugely grateful for you agreeing to be a guest on the Creative Noah podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I might replay that whenever I need a bit of a confidence boost.
Bless you. So yeah, go and check out Ava's work. There's links to everything in the show notes, and we'll be promoting this all over social media when it goes out. And yeah, have a great day. Thank you for listening to the Creative Noah podcast. If you found anything inspiring or useful in this episode, please consider subscribing or maybe sharing the episode with a friend. Anything you can do to help promote and support Creative Noah is so beneficial, and I really appreciate it. Check out the website and sign up to the newsletter to be the first to know of everything that's going on here in Creative Noah. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, explore, inspire, and create.
Better to have a short life that is full of what you like doing than a long life spent in a miserable way. And so, therefore, it's so important to consider this question: what do I desire?